Welcome to Vicksburg. 1863. A river-bent fortress where low-s hills breathe dust and the sky learns the grammar of artillery. Streets turn to caves by night. Families sleep inside the earth while mortars write slow-burning commas across the dark. On a back step lit by one tired lamp, a woman steadies a wicker basket and watches the water like it can answer. Her name is Sallie, if you know her, and this is not how fear found her. This is how she made fear change direction. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time your clock reads. If your family keeps a name for a woman who moved the world with bread, thread, and courage, drop her initials in the comments so the ledger remembers. There is a second sound beneath the guns, the hush of things arranged to look like nothing. A linen hung a heartbeat too long. A porch lamp that flares once then twice, teaching the dark to count. A scrap of paper folded thin into a seam and laid among warm loaves. The city above pretends it is geometry angles traverses abattis. But geometry has couriers, and they walk in shoes no one bothers to see. Sallie salts ground with ash, ghosts the air with crushed mint, learns which plank complains and which keeps a secret. The hounds' noses like knives begin to doubt themselves. Daylight dresses the town in ordinary. Magnolia leaves hold heat. A hoop clacks. Someone laughs like spring refuses to surrender. Under that brightness, roots coil and uncoil yard to yard, cave to river. Eliza borrows salt she already has. Between a word and its echo, a map bends. 3 lights, then 1. Hounds working the trace by the burned sycamore. A barge riding low beyond the bend. Do not name the river if the river can hear you. Night falls, slate blue. The house finishes talking, last dishes stacked, last lock clicked. Sallie counts to 96, number shifting, faith fixed, and steps into a yard that does not betray her. A moth does its suicidal math against hot glass. Far off, a shell chooses a street and completes it. The basket is too light for laundry. Between the loaves, linen. Inside the linen time place, a skiff that will look like driftwood until it moves. The dogs arrive late and rush the lie she wrote for them. Stove coal mint beds, a yard dog circles singing to their own mistake, while the river inhales like a witness who has promised nothing. The ledger of such nights will never be bound. It lives under a stare in chalk that smears. If breath is wrong, names like beads, marks like stars. Safe is a word too fragile to say aloud. Above ground, men rehearse certainty. Below, women master the sacred ordinary bread thread water ash. What they hid was never only a fact. It was a method. A way of moving between lights without catching any. Listen, 1. Dark. 2. Past the bend, a lantern winks back. The commas of the sky return. Every comma is a breath. Every breath a chance to move. And tonight, because one woman taught fear to turn the river, keeps the route. Morning arrives, like someone smoothing a sheet over a restless body. Creases remain, but light insists. The big house clatters awake in orders and china. The yard exhales steam and wood smoke. The river, patient as doctrine, keeps its shoulder to the city's ribs. Sallie moves through it all like ink through paper. Seen only if you hold her to the sun. She measures a day in useful certainties, how long the kettle takes to quiet. Which child forgets the latch? The way sourdough breathes when the air turns heavy. She knows where flour dust settles on the sill and how to ruin footprints with a single sweep of a willow switch. The mistress believes the world divides cleanly front parlor and back step ledger and gossip yet in the triangle of stove table door. Sallie governs a republic no one is named. Out past the hedgerow, the siege hums a hive, pretending to be a storm. Men stack gabions, axes speak in the timber lot. A mule brays offended by mathematics. But the kitchen yard is its own country pans, blinking on a line like mild moons. Soap boiling, lie giving its thin, bitter sermon. Eliza arrives with a tin for borax she does not need. The visit performs itself with theater's calm, two women discussing stains while a third thought stitches between them. Sallie's hands do honest work. Her eyes count honest distances, fence to smokehouse, smokehouse, to ash heap, to the dog's low bed. False normal looks better at noon, hot bright, loud with ordinary noises, by design. Ordinary is the cloak that never slips. The caves are a rumor you can walk into. Above them, porches yawn. Below, families build shelves from planks, pockets from shadow. Children learn the shape of quiet, how to keep it in their cheeks like hard candy. Sallie hates the caves and blesses them in the same breath. They are both wound in bandage. She keeps inventory the way captains do, lamp oil rags, cups, chalk pepper thread. She stores names the way she stores soap, cool dry, labeled in her head, ready to be carried without clinking. When a boy from the river quarter blinks too slow, she knows he hasn't slept. When a woman folds linen too carefully, Sallie sees the weight of paper hiding in the fold. Nothing announces itself. Everything is arranged. In the late heat, the house naps. A clock talks to itself. Somewhere upstairs, a hairbrush drops. The floorboards startle. Sallie tastes the air like a baker previewing dough damp with river edged with iron. She lays new ash where feet will later claim they never walked, sprinkles crushed mint in a seam of shade where scent likes to linger. She checks a knot in the fence post, sometimes holding the smallest roll of chalk-marked paper, the way a tree holds a lost nail. Beyond the lane, dogs sling themselves in dust ears, conducting rumors. If they glance once, twice, and then forget her, the map is working. If they stand and taste the wind well, there are other maps folded deeper. Evening performs its costume change. Lamps rouse, porch talk resumes, frogs write their little green script in the ditch. The city rehearses a play called Nothing is Happening, while ironclads clear their throats on the river. In that theater, Sallie keeps time loaf cooling kettles sighing two breaths. The door. She speaks to the dark, under her breath, as if it is a shy guest. The shy guest listens, and the world, naked under uniforms and titles, puts its faith in ceremony grace before beans a hymn a good night. Ceremony is a fine blindfold. Behind it, roots multiply like veins. The first sign is never a sound. It's the way sound goes wrong. Bloodhounds that should mutter begin to whine at nothing, and then at too much. A chain clinks once and tells a longer story than words. The second sign is a smell pepper that returns to the wrong faces when the wind remembers its manners. Men curse blink, call the night a liar. Good. Let the night take credit. Sallie's trade is to make mistakes happen where the ground is soft enough to forgive them. A lamp on the back porch flares once, then twice, and becomes simply a lamp again. A linen hangs past usefulness, pretending it forgot. In the cool beneath the smokehouse eave, a note sleeps inside us, twine ink impatient even while it dries. Eliza appears with a pocket of pins she cannot possibly have lost. Leaves with fewer than she came, because arithmetic sometimes is a door. In the cave, a woman hums to a child, the tuning note for a song that must not be sung yet. Overhead, mortars clear paragraphs in the sky. Commas of light drift, explaining nothing, buying time. The hunters alter their pattern, that is the third sign. A patrol that should pass at the hour of sermons lingers at the hour of soup. Boots learn new gravel. Laughter travels with a knife in it. The dogs are fed richer offal and believe for a moment the world is kind. Sallie watches the provost's horse discover a new way to ring the lane steel dirt steel again, as if someone taught it a rhyme. She changes the count from 96 to 73, then 51 small superstitions stitched into the hem of reason. Fear can be trained if you feed it on schedule. Notes shrink as danger grows, white space does more work. 3 lights, then 1. Sycamore, low water by the bend. The word river never appears, not even as a ghost. A crosshatch marks where gunboats sleep when no one is watching. A star with 5 points marks who must move no more, no less. Chalk rubs easy, breath smears it. Paper forgets itself in steam. When Sallie lifts the basket, it is the right weight to be ignored. Then comes the false omen. A neighbor's rooster declares midnight as dawn. Men laugh at omens until they need one. Sallie listens for the seam that matters, the brief, unmusical pause. When the mortars change crews, when even iron inhales. That is the slit she uses. She steps into the yard remembers its role. Ash keeps its promise. Mint hides its laughter. The dogs rise late. Noses greedy with a lie, written carefully in coal and habit. They rush where they're told by their own desire. And in the blue margin between shells, a skiff on black water decides to be a road. Night breathes, shallow, careful, as if the city fears to wake its own wounds. Then the hinge turns. The night seam opens, and the event that tightens every knot steps through without fanfare. A shell late and aimless wanders above the ridge. It learns the language of wood. The laundry shed answers with one steady bloom of orange, not a roar, a confession. Smoke lifts, slow, as if reluctant to be evidence. Men shout names, wrong ones first. Dogs bark, discovering courage in the volume of their throats. Sallie arrives, running, not a panic, a calculation, and finds the door already yawning on its iron strap. Inside, the tub hisses. A line of shirts blackens at the shoulder. A knot of twine has split, and something pale sleeps among wet linen, as if it belongs there. She reaches, then stops, because reaching is how you get caught. A breath. A count. A second breath. She tips the tub. Steam kneels. The pale thing slips. Not paper, not yet cloth, wrapping a smaller truth. She presses it against the inside of her apron, warm, almost alive, and steps back through the smoke as the world decides what story it wants to tell. Outside the yard invents culprits. A spark from the stove, a lamp careless, a servant boy foolish. The mistress chooses the version that hurts least, which is the version that blames most. Eliza's eyes meet Sallie's, one heartbeat, then look away. The pact between women is simple: move first, explain later. A hunter scrapes his boot against the threshold and smiles the way men smile when they think the future has arrived with their name on it. Notes, he says, making the cess into a promise. Sallie shrugs into the role the world wrote for her small, tired, competent, and begins to put out a fire that is already dying of boredom. Smoke writes gray cursive above them. Ash powders her sleeves. The dogs press close to the place where last night's lie still smells like truth. Noses confused by the echo of their own mistake. The hunter sniffs theatrically, the way boys at a fair pretend to know horses. Pepper, he says. Someone's cooking. Laughter, hard, bright, brief, snaps the scene shut like a lid. Back in the small windowless room, the one with the high shelf for tools and the low shelf for grief, Sallie unwraps the cloth. Inside, a stub of chalk. A note cramped into its smallest courage. A button she does not recognize, bone white and scuffed, as if it had a long conversation with a riverbed. The chalk says little marks, only 3 lights, then 1. A crooked cross that might be a bend. A star with 5 points incomplete. The note says less, and more not tonight here. At gate, no names, no river, no boats. The button says everything it can by being the wrong button in the wrong house. Ambiguity is a kind of mercy. It lets the truth change shape and live longer. Sallie folds the cloth again, smaller this time, and tucks it into the seam of a basket that will hold beans by morning and a choice by night. Evidence is a shy animal. You do not chase it. You learn where it drinks. Word travels as smoke does, thin at first, then everywhere. Somebody's been sending signals, Somebody's been seen by the trace. Somebody's a woman. The city's mouth is full of somebodies, none of them willing to be a name. In the caves, a child coughs until a spoon shaken like a charm brings silence. On the levee, a man watches the water until it watches him back. Sallie listens. Listening is work. The pattern that had seemed like lace, delicate, regular, forgiving, shows a torn thread. A patrol that shouldn't linger does again. A dog that shouldn't care lifts its head and cares twice. A lantern that should answer does not. The roots are still there, yard to yard, stoop to stoop, but the intervals have shifted. The music's key has slid half steps sour. Fear, well-fed, learns harmony, so she tightens the circle. No more notes in twine, no more knots in fence posts, no more flour sack ledgers under stairs. Chalk only, and then only where breath cannot smear. Bread only, and then only warm enough to look like kindness. Eyes only, yes, and even then, half a look. The women laugh louder at ordinary jokes. The men scan the laughter for guilt and find only weather. When Sallie crosses the yard at dusk, ash mint habit, the dogs do not rise. That is not comfort. That is a question. The questions multiply, then dress themselves as authority. A provost lieutenant, young boots, too clean grievance for posture, announces an inquiry. He likes the word, wears it like a sash. He asks the wrong things first to teach the room to love his voice, and writes nothing down because the page is a mirror and he cannot afford to look. Who was near the shed? Who handles lamps? Who visits whom after dark? The answers are a choreography, humble, careful, true, in the way a parable is true. He smirks. Smirks are cheap. A matron from town, hair perfect as an accusation, insists women cannot keep secrets because they talk too much. She does not hear her own sentence collapsing under its own weight. A man with hands scored by rope says the dogs only lie when fed lies. A second man, softer, says dogs lie like everyone else for company, for reward, for relief from boredom. The lieutenant prefers the first man. Preference feels like progress. He circles back. Who handles flour sacks? Who owns chalk? Who, and stops when the mistress lists the obvious everyone. Everyone, everyone. Ambiguity again does its work. The same dress fits every suspect. They search. Of course they do. They search like men sweeping crumbs from a table and calling it housekeeping. Boxes open, drawers complain. A scuttle is kicked for the pleasure of its hollow sound. The ledger, the one that lived under the stair, does not live there now. They find a different ledger, the kind with numbers, salt soap tins, and congratulate themselves on arithmetic. In a hem, a needle sticks a careless finger. The curse that follows is the first honest word spoken all afternoon. Evidence refuses to introduce itself. It has learned manners from women. Outside, the city performs the easy acts of survival. Frying, washing, mending, praying. Underneath the hard acts wait their turn. A rumor attaches itself to Eliza not because it fits, but because rumor is opportunistic, and men who could not pick her voice from a crowd repeat her name with the pleasure of believing they know something. Sallie wants to grind the rumor down to dust with the heel of her hand. Instead, she adds another fold to the day. The count 73, 51 slides again. The seam in the night where mortars change crews feels thinner. She will need to thread it without touching the sides. The lieutenant returns at dusk as if truth keeps bankers' hours. He asks for the basket. Which basket? All baskets, this basket. He does not know the weight beans should have. He does not know the smell bread keeps when it wants to be believed. He lifts, nods, sets down. A boy inside the cave city coughs. The lieutenant frowns as if sound could incriminate from a hill away. His questions droop. He finds the button not in the basket, not in the hem, in the palm of a child who likes to keep treasures smooth. Where did you get this? he asks, and the child answers honestly. The ground. The ground affronted keeps its counsel. Denial is a chorus. Investigation is a solo that cannot hold a tune. The minister says the Lord sees all, and then declines to see anything that would require him to stand between a woman and a dog. The merchant says he sells to every face, and then counts which faces still owe him, and decides guilt by ledger. A soldier says the enemy is out there pointing vaguely, and then searches the laundry room as if rivers learn to row themselves. Evidence the pale cloth, the chalk marks, the crooked cross stays where Sallie left it translated into a language only the night can read. And yet, the city's breathing changes. People step wider around corners. Doors linger open a heartbeat longer. Laughter lands with a second thought. You can't interrogate a change in weather, but you can live under it. Sallie walks the yard as ash-mint habit and feels the air push back as if it knows her name and wants to keep it. A dog lifts its head and gazes past her, not at her toward the sycamore stump where lies are supposed to nap. Good. Let the lie be a bed. She resets the map with smaller gestures. The roots shrink to the size of a nod, the falling of a linen at exactly the wrong moment. In the caves, a woman hums again, the same tune fuller now, and the child answers in a sleep sigh that sounds like a tide turning. Above the ironclads trade their patient thunder, one to another as if handing off time. The lieutenant, bored by his own questions, writes a single word at last watch, and underlines it as if the line itself were work. He will sleep well. Men who do not find what they seek often do. The women will not. They will watch the night for the seam for the breath for the chance. And Sallie, because she is not brave, only prepared, will move the ledger one last time into a place where even memory must ask permission to look. The city declares itself satisfied, which means it is tired. The dogs dream of simpler stories. The caves dim their constellations. And in the black interval between two patient shells, a skiff noses out from reeds, as if the river had grown a thought. Evidence, investigation, denial, each takes its bow. The play goes on. The secret place is not on any map, because it is the seam between maps, a culvert mouth swallowed by cane. A ditch that looks like drainage until you kneel, a black tongue of water that slides under the lane and remembers how to be a road. Sallie reaches it just before moonrise, a crouch that is also a prayer, and lets her palm find the damp brick where the chalk can live for one more minute. 3 lights, then 1. The star with 5 points, not ink, not speech. Only the ghost of marks rubbed away so often they have become a habit of the hand. She is not alone. Behind her breath stacks in quiet columns Eliza, the woman with the scar, whose name the ledger shortened to Mary, an uncle whose knees argue with the weather, but whose arms still remember oars, and the boy from the fence, taller somehow, like fear had stretched him. They are dressed in the grammar of ordinary, the apron the homespun, the coat that bears a patch, a day too new, and carry nothing that can be counted as contraband by a man who prefers counting to seeing. The culvert's throat gurgles impatient. Frogs mark the seconds like a petty clerk. Beyond the hedgerow, the provost's horse rings steel dirt. Steel, the rhyme it learned 2 nights ago, and the dogs complain about being kept from a better story. Now Sallie breathes not a command. A key, and the uncle lowers the bundle into the dark. The bundle is a skiff, folded by patience ribs of willow, a belly taut with scraped hide. It smells of river and stubbornness. The boy steadies. Eliza touches the water, as if salting meets superstition, yes, and also a blessing. Somewhere upriver, iron clears its throat, the gunboats trading their thunder like a jug passed between friends who like to hear the sound of fullness. That thunder is not cover. It is attention. Men listen to it. Dogs flinch at it. Fear mistakes it for authority. Good. Let iron be the noise. Let the river be the root. But the secret place has a second mouth. All secrets do, and this one opens where Sallie least expects it. The dogs rise early, not late, not fooled noses cutting the evening into pieces and eating every piece. A single bark lands wrong and wakes 3 others. A chain sighs metal memory, and a man's laugh follows close behind, as if he's been waiting to enjoy it. The hunters come through the cane like a sermon, confident, repetitive, eager to be believed. The lieutenant is with them, boots now properly dirty, grievance ripened into right. He speaks the word again, inquiry, and it does what nouns do under the moon. It looks like a weapon. Step away from the ditch, he says, and the ditch pretends it is just a ditch, the way an actor stops being a king when the curtain falls. Eliza does not look at Sallie. Sallie does not look at Eliza. To look is to write a note you cannot burn. The moment would snap. It should snap, if not for a smaller sound, one that does not belong to men or dogs or iron. A child, not the cave child, a different small life hiccups in the cane. The body's tiny rebellion against order. The nearest hound pivots grace on claws and inhales a history. It finds pepper first, then ash, then stove coal, the whole catechism of misdirection, its certainty wobbling like a plate on a bad table. The second hound does not wobble. It commits. It pulls. A man stumbles, swears, recovers, grins, the kind of grin that thinks a story is over. There the lieutenant says, pointing at nothing in particular, which is what power does when it believes itself. The boy's knuckles go white on the willow rib. The uncle's jaw sets. The skiff shivers, an animal deciding whether to run. Sallie makes a choice that is both too small and exactly the right size. She lifts the basket, the same basket the lieutenant weighed with beans and ignorance, and shakes out the linen as if airing a thought. The air takes the thought, and does what air does, it moves. A puff of pepper. Not a cloud, a sigh drifts across the dog's busy map and redraws the terrain. The first hound sneezes wounded pride and veers toward the yard dog's old circle. The second overcorrects. The chain tangles with a third. Men curse each other with the intimacy of shared failure. It is not a victory. It is a breath. In that breath, the uncle pushes. The skiff glides, mouth of culvert, slow black muscle, and the current takes it as if recognizing kin. The boy slips in a cut, barely disturbing the skin of the ditch. Eliza follows knees, then skirt a prayer, becoming a root. The lieutenant recovers his balance with a word that tastes of brass. "Stop," he says, as if sound could hammer water into stillness. He steps forward and the ditch becomes a ditch again, shallow, sullen, no boat to shame him. Only frogs who have no respect for rank. They ran. He announces to men who prefer announcements to outcomes and orders lanterns to be raised. Lantern light slams into cane and throws nervous shadows that look like guilt. A hunter finds the old ledger, hide the hollow under the stair, no longer holding the chalk's dust, and calls it evidence with the enthusiasm of a man who has never met the real thing. The lieutenant notes the absence of paper, as if absence were a confession. Sallie watches his mouth shape certainty. She wonders if he knows he is praying. The river receives. The culvert's dark ribbon lets out into backwater a page turn. A sudden breathless white space, and then the broader ink of the Yazoo Flats. Trees stand ankle-deep like witnesses who stayed after court. Fireflies practice their quiet Morse. The ironclads, farther than they sound, move like a rumor that has decided to be true. The skiff rides lower than comfort, but higher than despair. The uncle counts in oar lengths, a mathematics that was old before the war, and will be old after it, and the boy learns to keep time with breathing. Eliza holds the child against the bell of her ribs, shh, shh, as if teaching the baby a tide. Behind them, tunnels of cane, ahead a horizon that hides its teeth. They are not free. They are not caught. They are moving, and movement is the first grammar of freedom. Back at the yard, the men try consequence on like a coat. The lieutenant chooses to kick the wash copper. It makes the right hollow thunderman versus vessel and presents him with a feeling of control. He calls for names. The mist answers with crickets. He threatens the caves. Earth answers with the smell of old iron and old milk. He turns to the mistress for a list of servants, as if lists confine as well as walls, and she offers what she has. Everyone. 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 He seizes on Eliza Rumor's favorite shape and discovers what Rumor always hides: stubbornness. She meets his eyes just long enough to remind him she has them. "You'll hang for this," a hunter says, because threat is the only poetry he knows. Eliza shrugs the shrug of a woman who has already done the hardest thing tonight: step into water when land was safer. In the cane, a single lantern lifts once, then dark, then twice the small lit fact that keeps large facts honest. From far down river, another answers a wink that belongs to no one and everyone. Sallie watches the lieutenant watch the lantern, his thoughts showing like bones under bad light, and sees the moment he chooses not to see. To see would be to admit the world is porous. To see would be to learn his boots are not bridges. He barks orders to move the dogs toward the sycamore stump. They obey, grateful perhaps to be told a simpler story. The yard breathes again, not safe, possible. The irrefutable proof comes at dawn, not as paper, as consequence. A gunboat, the one thought too slow to matter, slides ghost quiet along the bend and opens its mouth in a short, disciplined sentence. The shell finds the patrol's new favorite corner, the one they boasted of, and teaches timber the shape of humility. The boom arrives last, after splinters, after dust, and the city learns a new flinch. Men say words about coordinates and angles. Later they will draw maps and pretend the chalk moved itself. But the truth, the small embarrassing truth, is that a woman's ledger of roots and pauses and breaths altered a line of sight she was never supposed to touch. The ironclad captain will never know her name. His report will note an advantageous angle secured during night movement. That is what irrefutable looks like when it must eat at an officer's table. Sallie does not cheer. She counts faces. Eliza returns near sunrise, wet to the waist, a leaf in her hair like a medal. The child sleeping as if born from water. The uncle does not return, not then. Later, a note folded in oilskin will say him safe under a different name. A name he likes because it fits nothing and therefore fits everything. The boy appears at noon with a scratch that looks worse than it is and a silence that is heavier than the skiff. He has seen a dog die a bad knot, a panic a lesson, and though it was a cruel dog, it was still a dog, and death in any tongue is a noun large enough to bruise a child. Sallie sets bread on a sill to cool the most ordinary act she knows and lets the heat write a new soft law in the room we continue. The hidden place where the ledgers have lived under the stare under breath yields one last secret to the day. A shelf that had always sat wrong, crooked, loyal to nothing, gives beneath Sallie's thumb. Behind it a hollow, no human hand carved holds what the house forgot when it was built, a mason's chalk line. A penny from a year that nobody at the yard ever had. And a scrap of ribbon, the color of stubborn sky. Nothing that would convict everything that explains. Houses keep ledgers too. Theirs are made of drafts and creaks of boards that remember which footsteps meant safety and which meant storm. Sallie presses her ear to the wood, feels the house breathe, and believes for an indecent second that even timber can decide who it prefers to shelter. News walks in on someone else's legs. A soldier's wife says the trenches to the east smell like rain, which is to say like rot, and everyone nods like they have been to school with that truth. A grocer swears the price of flour is a sin. A preacher swears sin is the price of flour. The same men count their coins. Beneath and between their sentences, the fact that 5 souls moved, and a 6th if you count a dog's stubborn life, passes like a river under footbridges. The lieutenant pens his report in a hand that flatters itself. It mentions discovered conspiracies and suspicious lanterns, then arrives redundantly at heightened vigilance. He underlines the last phrase twice because ink is cheaper than success. Sallie carries water the wholly ordinary, and the bucket's lip taps the rail with a sound like a small bell that has forgiven its clapper. On the rail she sets a stone, an old habit signaling gone. But returning, and within the hour, someone has moved it a finger width, signaling saw, and understood. The city thinks it invented semaphore with flags and lamps. The yards know better. The yards can talk with anything that holds still long enough to be moved. In the cave, Mary with the scar stitches in a new place, and the baby learns to laugh without apology. Above, magnolia leaves keep their gloss even under ash. The world, indifferent, enormous turns. The gruesome part, if you need the word, if the genre requires it, is not blood. Blood is a crude tutor. It is the collar left in a ditch, metal bright, where it rubbed a neck, and dull where a hand held it. The raw place on a man's wrist, where a chain had expected acquiescence and learned temper. The print of a child's heel in river mud that filled with clear water, and for a moment looked like a small mirror. It is the ledger's empty space where names should go, the hunger of that whiteness, and the knowledge that blankness can be a shield. Yes, and also a theft. Sallie stands at the culvert mouth at dusk and watches minnows fuss in their private parliament. She lets a scrap of chalk sink and disappear. Sometimes evidence must drown to save the living. The immediate aftermath learns its name quickly. The dogs are kept tighter, shorter leashes, harsher hands, which makes them meaner and less useful at once. The lieutenant takes credit for 2 arrests. He did not make boys careless with matches, and writes their guilt into a paragraph that will last longer than their names in town memory. The mistress dismisses Eliza, then rehires her under a new pretense, because even cruelty needs competence to survive. A rumor says a woman was seen at the levee shawl basket lamp, and another rumor says the lamp was a man with a hot temper. Rumor enjoys costume changes. The ironclads drift. The mortars converse. A war does what wars do. It eats time until there is only after. Sallie chooses a smaller after. She leaves bread on the sill again, a promise to hunger. She places 3 pins on the back porch rail, 1 tall, 2 short. And when she returns at dusk, there is only 1 short pin left. The code needs no key, too safe. 1 still moving. She will not know which until knowing is useful. She lifts the basket, just the weight of laundry now, and learns by the absence of threat in the yard's silence that some nights work like blessings, others like sleep. The culvert mouth darkens. The cane rehearses wind. Somewhere beyond the bend, a lantern winks once. Then dark. Then twice, and she allows herself 1 breath that is not work. What they hid, the men with paper, the city with pride, the war with its appetite, cannot be hidden here any longer. Not because someone will write it down. Writing is a fragile raft. Because the root exists now in bodies, a muscle memory, a reflex, a scar that knows which way the river runs. The proof is not in ink. It is in the way a woman moves from stove to door without looking like a messenger. In the way a child sleeps through thunder because someone taught the air to cradle him. In the way a dog someday will follow a scent straight to the truth and lie down anyway out of sheer confusion at a world that refuses to be singular. Night comes on like a verdict and discovers to its irritation that the sentence has already been served. The city's lamps thin, the frogs recommence, the iron finds its commas in the sky. Sallie steps to the threshold and listens to a quiet that she earned not fully, not forever, but enough. She thinks of the ledger rubbed to dust, of names that chose not to be written so that lives could continue the work of being alive. She thinks finally a thought she does not say, that fear is a river too. And tonight it ran the other way. The surrender comes. July writes itself like chalk on warm brick, and the city exhales a long, complicated breath that smells of damp gunpowder. Bread gone to heal, and relief learning to stand. Flags change. Uniforms invert their meaning. Orders retranslate into a different grammar of authority. Men argue over dates, over which hour counts as the moment, over who held which angle, at which redoubt when the river decided to take sides. Reports, harvest numbers, cartridges, expended rations, issued bodies buried by hurried hands, and the ledgers of victory begin to dress the new day in respectable ink. Down in the caves, lanterns gutter to stubs. Blankets are shaken. A child, suddenly unafraid of thunder, startles at birdsong instead. On the levee, someone laughs the wrong kind of laugh, too free, too early, and then learns to fold joy back into the careful shape of survival. And yet, amid all these official beginnings, something ends that no paper intends to mention. Erasure puts on its work clothes. It looks like a clerk hair-oiled pen mended, copying a paragraph from one column to another and deciding without malice that women are scenery. It looks like a quartermaster who inventories shovels and soap and forgets the roots that moved souls the way water moves silt. It looks like a captain whose clean boast, an advantageous angle secured during night movement, grows a neat line on a map where Sallie once kept only breath and timing. The ledger under the stair is gone. Of course it is. Rub to ghost translated into action, drowned where minnows make parliament. In its place, an X on a chart, and a memory already persuading itself that it never needed a name to be true. A preacher thanks Providence because Providence never asks for attribution, and the city nods weary, grateful to let the Almighty shoulder the citations. Sallie knows this liturgy, the way triumph edits the way survival misfiles. She has met its cousins, the rumor that hardened into judgment, the judgment that hardened into policy, the policy that hardened into a story told at a table set by victors for themselves. She watches the new uniforms walk the old lanes, steel dirt steel, and notes how quickly boots can learn a rhyme. A lieutenant, not hers, not the grievance boy with the clean boots, turned dirty, stops by the kitchen yard and admires the order of pans on the line. The quiet industry of a place that kept a city fed while the hills invented caves. Ordinary heroism, he says a kind phrase, and then moves on because the world is rich with fires that want to be put out in public. Ordinary is the cloak that never slips, and also the cloak that lets a life vanish from the eye that would swear it is looking. She marks what can be kept. She writes no names, not now. Only the shape a name makes in a room, a heavier silence, a knocked cup, a whisper that knows when to wear shoes. She sets bread on a sill at the hour when hunger recognizes itself. She places 3 pins on a rail at noon and finds at dusk that only one remains. A code is a rope you throw between days. It does not need to be admired to hold. She shows a child the root under the hedgerow, not with words, with the body learning how to fold, where the cane thins and teaches that fear like a bell can be muffled if you line it with cloth. She keeps ash where ash belongs, pepper where pepper bites, mint where mint pretends to be merely pleasant. She lets the house keep its secrets, a shelf that yields a stair that sings a window latch that will not betray a careful hand, because houses carry history better than pages when weather gets involved. The new ledgers grow fat. They list bales and barrels and souls by categories that make sense from a desk. They discover an appetite for columns titled contraband that do not mean cloth. Men reconcile numbers with the patience of saints and the curiosity of bankers. When a woman speaks of caves, a clerk asks for dimensions, length, height, cubic feet of safety, and writes down an estimate that has the virtue of appearing real. When Sallie mentions the culvert mouth only once, only to test the temperature of the new air, the listener nods as if a culvert is an ordinary noun, which it is, until you have learned it as a verb. He thanks her for community intelligence, then files the thanks where thanks go to nap. The record will show she was present at the interview. The record will not show the seam she used in the night when mortars changed crews and even iron inhaled. The record loves verbs that salute. It finds verbs like carried, assisted, observed. It does not love taught fear to turn. There is a question that sits uneasy at the edge of the new morning. A bruise that refuses to yellow. How many roots vanished the moment they succeeded? The skiff leaves no handwriting on water. The ash that masked a footstep keeps the yard's promise and returns to dirt. A dog learns the taste of its own mistake and sleeps. Lives continue, which is the loudest argument for silence and history. Impatient reaches for stories that stand still long enough to be painted. The monumental prefers clean edges, bronze verbs, names that keep their letters when rain pulls at them. But the grammar of what happened here was always whisper, comma, breath, pause, and then the move. You cannot engrave that on anything but a life. So Sallie tells it sideways, as mothers do as keepers of houses and weather and wounds have always done. She folds the tale into tasks, into the rhythm of dough, into the correction of a stitch, into the practice of stepping through a door without waking its hinge. She teaches Eliza's child and the fence boy, grown long, and Mary with the scar, when her needle rests, that safety has a choreography and courage a schedule. She never says hero the word would burn the good out of the facts, but she says map and seam and count to 96, then to 73, then to 51, then to whatever number the night requires. We continue, she says, over cooling bread, and the room trained by hunger remembers how to agree. And if a new officer asks later whether she served, she will say yes, and mean the verb that does not wear a uniform. There is a superstition, call it a legacy, that clings to Vicksburg after the flags are folded and the last shell's dust mouths the last shelf on certain nights. When the river holds its breath, dogs near the old sycamore stump will rise, whine at nothing, and circle a place that is not there. The men who drink too late say, this proves dogs know ghosts. The women who rise too early say nothing proves more than the weather. But in the pause between certainty and sleep, even skeptics hear it a small arithmetic in the dark one, then the dark, then two, as if a lamp were practicing its manners where no porch remains. Children raised in caves become adults who cannot settle in houses without digging a shelf a hollow. A second room only their shoulders remember. They joke about it, old habits, and then sometimes do not joke at all. The curse. If you insist on the word that sells tickets, the curse is administrative. It is the paperwork that never found the names and the speeches that loved the shape of victory more than its texture, and the monuments that learned to point at angles and forgot to point at kitchens. It is the official sentence that omitted the clause where women altered the angle of a gunboat's thought. It is the blank in a family Bible where a name should sit because silence bought that life and demanded interest. It is the way a city can crawl into the earth to save its pulse, and then crawl out and decide the darkness owes it no memory. Curses do not need blood to be macabre, a signature will do. And still, because the world is generous, even when ungentle the ledger survives, where ledgers always have their best chance, not in drawers, in people. 5 souls moved that night. The 5th point of the star went bright and did not dim. One of them grows to say the river's name without flinching. Another learns to argue prices like someone who has known a simpler currency breath and refuses to be overcharged. A child who slept with mortar commas in the sky learns to read books for the places where sentences remember to breathe. A woman with a scar sews slower, then truer. The thread forgives, and so does her hand. Eliza rehired under a different pretense. Buy a house that could not afford to lose her competence, keeps a basin on a shelf that has no dust, a shrine that does not need candles to know what it means. Sallie ages the way the hill faces do, softening along the edges, holding firm beneath. In time, she leaves the kitchen yard for rooms whose windows admit more honest light. She spends a long season smelling no pepper in the night, the air clean with rain, with bread with ordinary fatigue. And then another season when rumor returns rich and wants to be fed again. She refuses both panic and complacency. The house listens to her steps and chooses sides. She stands sometimes at the culvert mouth, a ditch now, resentful, almost filled, and thinks of minnows learning to keep a secret. She has no appetite for statues. If someone painted her, she would wipe flour on the frame and call it better. What she wants is smaller and more difficult, that a child by any river should learn the count 1, dark, 2, and understand it means move now quietly, because the world is loud. The question we owe her, that we owe the ledger, rubbed a ghost, is not was she real? As if the only truths that deserve a chair at the table are those that have learned to sit for portraits. The right question is simpler and heavier. How many roots taught in whispers carried this country past the moment when it should have broken? How many kitchens deserve to be called forts? How many women taught fear to turn and then could not afford to tell anyone they had done it? History, if it wishes to be anything more than a parade of names with marrow-thin shadows, must learn to read what the margins tried to keep safe for it. Before we close, if your town keeps a cave, a culvert, a second room, the builder's claim is a mistake. Tell us in the comments who it kept safe. If your family has a ledger that was never bound, initials, not names. Marks, not boasts. Write the first letter here, and the river will keep the rest. And if you pass a lamp tonight and it flares once, then dark, then twice, consider that the past is not calling you back. It is teaching you how to go forward.